Every single day, I see the same posts on Reddit. My insurance rejected my dental bill. I can't get into the public health insurance. Is the expat plan I'm on a scam? Hi, I'm Matthias, and I've spent the last decade helping thousands of expats navigate the bureaucratic nightmare that is the German insurance world. And there's one thing I have realized. The advice that people can get online is often very dangerous. It's full of half-truths, and if you base a decision on a half-truth, which, in the long run, we're talking about thousands of euros, is not the way to go. In the worst case, it could even get you kicked out of the country. We're launching this show, and every week we'll be diving into the real questions you're asking on Reddit, Facebook, and Toy Town to give you the honest answers that insurance apps and insurance brokers don't really want to tell you. Today, we are talking about the health trap. We found 7 burning questions from Reddit that prove one thing: easy insurance is often a trap. So, the first question that we have from somebody on Reddit is, can I get a dental insurance if I've already been recommended a crown? First up, that's one of the most common questions that people have. The way the system works in Germany is normally with most providers, once I already have damage or once somebody's documented that I need a treatment done, it will be excluded from my cover. It's dangerous in a way to leave it away, because what happens is the insurance company will ask to see your medical record. In Germany, you have to keep medical records for at least 10 years. So if you have a dental insurance and you say, well, in the first couple of years you need a crown, they will guaranteed ask to see either your TK record or your pharma record or wherever you are insured, to make sure that that wasn't existent before you insured yourself. There's no point in trying to hide it because they will find out. However, obviously the sensible thing is, like with any insurance, you should insure yourself before the damage has already been done. That's sort of the whole theory of an insurance. But especially with dental insurances, there are some providers that will also insure damage which is already there, or a crown which you already need, or a filling which you already need, or whatever. However, they're quite expensive and they'll only cover a smaller proportion of the damage or the cost to fix the damage than had you started before. Especially with dental. Dental is super expensive in Germany. So I've had 1 tooth replaced in my life. My neighbor, funnily enough, is a dentist and he's got the biggest house in the whole town. And the 1 tooth replacement costs 4,042 euros. So being state insured, I was left facing 3,400 euros, which I would have to pay myself of that. Luckily, I have obviously got private cover and I didn't face that, but they're the costs we're talking about. The sensible thing is, especially with dental, where we do have gaps in the state insurance, is to insure yourself before the damage is done or before the house is on fire. My neighbor is an implantologe. He does implants, right? He has the biggest house. You cannot believe how big his house is. He drives 2 Porsches. He drives this and that and whatever. And it's true. I have to go and see my neighbor. But I know he's very good, right? But I know he's very expensive, to the point that when Tom Cruise was filming Mission Impossible in Cologne, he flew down to see my neighbor to have his teeth done. It's a serious dentist, my neighbor. Anyway, so I'm paying far too much for it, but he does do a good job. Okay, the next question that we've also got from Reddit, the expat insurance. How does it work with my visa? Will it affect applying for my visa? The answer is quite clearly yes. So for healthcare in Germany to be considered compliant, it has to be limitless. So it's not allowed to have a time limit on it. It's also not allowed to have a cover limit on it. And what I mean by a cover limit is many expats and insurances, many international insurances say they'll pay for 30,000 euros a year or 2 million euros over a lifetime or something like that. That's not allowed in Germany. It has to cover everything. A German health insurance, to be compliant, has to basically cover everything that the doctor prescribes. There are not allowed to be any exclusions in that, and there are not allowed to be any limitations. So most expat tariffs haven't got this. They really are limited. The classical one is the travel insurance, which normally have 30,000 euros a year. So they're not considered compliant. You go to the Ausländerbehörde to get your visa, and they won't accept it. The problem is, once you've been in Germany for a while on your expat insurance and you go and get an insurance, a proper one, because the visa says you need it, every time for every month you're in Germany where you don't have a compliant health insurance, you pay a penalty. If you're on an expat insurance, most state insurances will say, well, I'm sorry, we don't need to insure you, and we won't insure you because you're already privately insured. Most private insurances will look at your health and in a lot of cases say, we can't insure you. Taking the easy, cheaper option to begin with of the expat insurance is actually often a really big financial hit in the long run. And the day will come when you do need your visa. And the day will come when you do need a compliant health insurance, which covers not just your health, but your long-term nursing care as well, which no international or expat insurance will cover. Last little bit, the way people always get caught in Germany for not having an insurance, everything in Germany that you pay into you pay towards your social security, whether it's your healthcare, your pension, your nursing care, your unemployment, your part of that lowers the taxable income that you have. So it has to appear on your tax return. You do your tax return and the guy in the tax office says, that's fine. Hang on a minute. Where's your healthcare? And then you're already looking at quite hefty fines. So sooner or later, we do all get caught if we don't do it the right way. Okay, now for the next question. Is it true that private insurances in Germany do not cover pre-existing conditions? Theoretically, that is actually true. The state insurance, they have to insure you from a health point of view. They're not allowed to ask health questions. The private insurance do ask health questions. So in every application, there are maybe 10 or 12 questions that they ask. Have you been to a doctor in the last 3 years? Have you been to a hospital in the last 5 years? Do you have any teeth missing? Do you have any chronic illnesses? And so on. As soon as you answer yes to one of those, they would like to have a little bit more information. And based on that information that they have, they will then make a decision. They will either insure you with no extra surcharges or difficulties. They will say to you, we will insure you, but it's going to cost you 10% more because, I don't know, your acne needs ongoing treatment or something like that. Or they say, I'm sorry, we can't insure you. They look at your health as a risk. Part of the premium is based on your risk. So they look at that very closely. The reason why they're not allowed to exclude things is, as we said before, a German compliant health insurance has to cover everything that's medically necessary. Therefore, no exclusion. You have to be a little bit careful when you're applying because there is a sense. So if you go on a portal, you apply yourself and you get turned down, you are then in the central register, which makes it very, very difficult for you to be able to insure yourself somewhere else. However, there are ways of applying, and we at Stay, we always make sure if we're not sure that we do an anonymous risk assessment question before we actually apply, making sure that we don't get in this position that we have rejection. It's either an anonymous rejection, but never a rejection with your name, leaving it open to you to apply in other places after that. It seems a little bit unfair that they do it this way. However, they do it to protect everybody who is insured. Basically, if they insure people with a high risk, the premiums of everybody else who hasn't got a high risk will be more unstable. So for the individual, it's not quite fair. For the insured group, it's the only fair way of doing it. Many of us want to join the public insurance when we first come to Germany, but it can be difficult. The hard truth is, if you're not an employee, so you're either unemployed at the moment when you move to Germany, or you're a freelancer and you come from outside of the EU, then the state insurance won't actually offer you. You can't join the state insurance of your own free will. They won't offer you cover. So for people who come from outside of the EU, who aren't employed, the only solution that they have at first is to insure themselves privately. And then depending on whether they get a job afterwards, if they're above the threshold of 77,400 a year that you have to earn next year or below, anybody above will stay in the private insurance. Anybody below will, by law, have to go back to the state anyway. The state insurance is a complicatedly calculated system, and they really, really do not accept people unless they're employed. So actually a good question. Is it true that when coming to Germany, not everybody can insure themselves in the state system? In many cases, that is actually true. So Anybody coming to Germany who's an employee will always be able to, as long as they've not been insured privately in Germany before, be able to insure themselves in the state system. Anybody coming from the EU will also be able to insure themselves in the state system. If they're freelancers, even if they're unemployed, that's not a problem. The problem and that people have coming from outside of the EU, if they're not employed, again, if they're unemployed, job seekers, or freelancers, they will not be allowed to join the state insurance. There are quite strict rules there, and they won't make any exceptions to that. So if you do come from outside of the EU and you're a freelancer, you might want to consider getting yourself a so-called mini job. A mini job, you have to earn, well, to be safe, around 600 euros a month. And that way, you're automatically in the system. You're automatically obliged to pay into the social security system. And therefore, you can insure yourself with the state. Another question we get asked a lot is there any private insurance or expat insurance for which I can apply to before I actually move to Germany and have not registered living at an address yet? So I haven't done my so-called Anmeldung at the town hall. The answer is theoretically no. However, with specialist knowledge and knowing how insurance companies work, we at Stay have found a solution where you can insure yourself on the basis of having a work contract, a signed work contract saying that you will come to Germany, you will start on this day, rather than actually already having an address, and also rather than already having your visa. This, of course, makes it so much easier for many of our clients because they can sort everything out before they come to Germany, whilst they still have a little bit of time and peace, because we know when they come to Germany, they have 1,001 things to do, and it starts to become a real hassle. The answer is theoretically no, but if you speak to the right people, yes, it is possible. Another question that gets often asked on Reddit is, what are the best options? What are my options if I'm starting a family? Should I insure myself privately? Should I insure myself with the state insurance? If you come from many EU countries or the UK, you're used to the fact that your children are automatically insured with you at no extra cost. This is true in the German state system. However, in the private system, everybody has to insure themselves. That means somebody who has 3 children and a partner at home looking after them, it often means that private insurance starts to work out very expensively for them. Obviously, they have slightly better cover, but from a financial point of view, often makes sense to, well, it nearly always makes sense to insure yourself with the state system. One of the things we pay particular attention to with state is that we do actually give honest advice. So if somebody says, I would like to start a family, I would like to go in Elternzeit, so I would like to take time off motherhood, things like that, then the state will most likely be your best option. And we will actually explain to you that, and we will actually advise you in that direction. We often have young would-be mothers who say, yes, but I'd like to insure myself privately because I'd like the best cover and things like that. Even with people like that, we explain to them, listen, you'd be much, much better off in the state insurance, but if you're worried about the birth, if you're worried about your child needing medical care after birth or something like that, why not choose the state insurance and add a supplementary health insurance to make you a private patient in hospital or something like that. So whilst the birth there is that you're covered. So really, we do make a point of actually trying to give the advice to people that makes the most sense. And finally, the question that also gets asked an awful lot is it true that if I insure myself privately, that I can never go back to the state insurance? There's a couple of points I'd like to make about that. If you've planned your private insurance well, then it won't become too expensive when you retire. And the question is, why would you want to go back to the state? Because the older you become, or let's call it differently, we don't become any healthier with age. So I have a private insurance. I'm working, and I never actually use it. And then when I really need it, when I retire and I start to have hip problems or arthritis or whatever, I can't afford it anymore and I want to go back to the state insurance. That doesn't make sense to me. So it's all to do with planning. However, it is true, and I'm afraid to say it is true, that many people, many pensioners pay too much for their private health insurance. They A, haven't planned it properly, and B, what most of them do is when they're 55, when they're 50 plus, they start a company, they leave the state insurance because they've just started their company, wanted to insure themselves as cheaply as possible. It goes on, they stay in the private insurance, and they really are on the cheapest tariff. The problem is, with being in the cheapest tariff, when you get to retirement, you have nowhere to run to. The way to protect yourself best is whilst you're working, have a good tariff with a one bed, low deductibles, and so on. And when you then retire, well, do you really need the one bed, or would you be happy with a two bed in hospital? And wouldn't a €300 or €500 deductible a year be okay for you? If you do that, you will find that your premium that you're paying for the new tariff sinks over proportionally. And in that way, you're not actually paying more than you would have done in the state insurance. Once you're 55, it's true, you cannot go back to the state insurance. However, the question is not, how do I do that? How do I legally do that? The real question is, if I've done everything right, why would I want to do that? So we've covered a few questions there. They get asked a lot. There are obviously so many more questions that you have because we do have this thing in Germany, I believe, and it's a German mentality thing. If it's not complicated, it can't be good. So we tend to, when we're explaining things or doing things, overcomplicate everything. In reality, it's not actually that difficult. You just need to ask the right questions that you want to know, and you need to find the right person who explains it to you in a manner which is understandable. And you'll see it's actually not such a bureaucratic nightmare here in Germany. We just tend to make it that way. So if you have any more questions with the live shows that we're doing, they're there for you to ask these questions, and we'll give you honest answers about what really is good for you and not what is really good for the broker or what is really good for the insurance company. You can ask whatever you like, and we'd love to give you an answer. We're here to help, and we're here to bring a little bit of light in the dark.